Welcome to the MFR Coaches podcast, where we talk about how you can create a six-figure MFR practice. I'm your host, Heather Hommel. Not only have I been practicing MFR for 11 years, I'm also a life and business coach, especially for MFR therapists. My goal is for you to understand how to get fully booked, how to talk to your clients, and how to make sure they understand what's possible for them with MFR treatment. I'm here to help you stop under-earning, overworking, and burning out. I'll lend support so you can create the MFR practice you've always wanted. Learn how you can do it too, even if you live in a tiny town, and even if you're just starting out, and even if you've ran your practice for years. Let's go. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the MFR Coaches podcast. I'm your host, Heather Hommel, the MFR coach, and I help you get fully booked in your MFR practice and never under-earn or burn out so that we can make MFR mainstream. Today, I have a guest of the program, Unu Tran. Unu has his own podcast. I don't know if you guys have ever listened to it before, but go over and start listening to him. It's called Myofascial Health Podcast with Unu. Welcome to the program. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. It's a little bit allergy season in Austin, so I got a little sniffle, a little bit of allergies, but other than that, I'm feeling fantastic.
All right. As someone who's also allergic to the air, I feel your pain. All right. Well, welcome to the program. I wanted to have you on for a couple of reasons. One, because I noticed that you help MFR therapists to build websites, and also that you're a fellow MFR therapist and you have a podcast. And I think anytime people can be exposed to services or people that can help them, I think it's great to network and show up to the community in that way. So why don't we talk first about the websites that you help people with? How did you come up with that idea?
Yeah, so it's a long story. So I started my own practice, physical therapy, helping rock climbers in 2019. And then the pandemic happened. And I, just like many of us, had lost a ton of my patients. And I was trying to figure out how I could navigate through this COVID pandemic, because there's not really a textbook answer on how to do it. Everyone was kind of just figuring it out on the fly. And so I had come upon the decision to recognize, hey, you need an online presence. No matter what happens, if you just are treating some people in person and something like the pandemic happens, you need something to supplement your income. And so I went on this long journey on how to start an online course. And ultimately, I learned the process. And it's not just as easy as, hey, I have a great idea. I'm going to record some videos and I'm going to post it out there and I'm going to be super rich, that. Right. Even though the opportunity is tantalizing in terms of I could serve the world. There's so many more opportunities. It is much harder and intricate than that idea. And I'll say that through creating several online courses, I had gotten burnt out. The strategies that I had been taught were, the way that you build an online course is you sell it first. That way, you know that there's actually a need and a want for it. And once you validate that idea, then you build it 1 week ahead. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Catch Me If You Can with Leonardo DiCaprio, but he plays this con artist, so to speak, but he teaches, I think, a Harvard class. And they had asked him, how did you teach these Harvard students if you didn't, graduate from Harvard and have these accolades? And he said, well, I had the textbook and all I knew that I had to do was be 1 week ahead of them and I could teach them the textbook. And so what I had learned with the online courses is you had to be 1 week ahead. Now, while yes, that does force you to get it done, because I think a lot of times we start things and we never finish them, it created a lot of stress for myself because it's building the airplane while you're flying it. And yeah, it's just super, super stressful to the point where I got burnt out and I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. It's so stressful. And granted, the first time you build it is the most work that it takes. So after you get it built, then it becomes running it again, refining the process. But the bulk of the work is on the front end. And so I'll say that I, was burnt out. And then I went to a trip to Sedona and I'm going to share a story and I hope you don't.
Yeah, bring it.
Okay. So I had this idea of maybe I should teach myofascial therapists how to create their own websites. I built multiple websites for myself and I would love to teach this to others because I could see that this is a need. But because I'd gotten burnt out from trying these online courses, I just kind of tucked it away in my back pocket until I went on a trip to Sedona, and I went on a UFO tour. So I don't know if you guys are MFR therapists, but they have UFO tours out there. And it was a great tour. And UFOs exist. That is the wildest thing to me. You know, it's like we got taken out to this like empty parking lot, and Sedona has very strict laws with light pollution. And so the first impression was like, yo, we're just in a parking lot. Like, what is this going to be about? And we get these like infrared goggles, like supposedly military grade. And then we have our tour guide, who would like point them out. And I was thinking like, okay, maybe we see one, maybe we see two, at the most, maybe three, right? But I had gone with my partner, Yvette, and between me and her, we had seen over 10. It was like,
wow.
They were like, I don't know if it was just the day or what, but we had seen over 10. And I was like, wow, I can't believe they exist, right? Like the way that I will describe it is like, there's certain tribes, let's say in the Amazon rainforest, right? Like they have no connection to the outside world. And there's been videos where like a plane has flown over and they kind of look up and they don't know what it is. But the pilot in the plane is like, oh, there's those Amazon tribes people, right? It's kind of that same feeling where it's like, you can see them, but we don't know the technology in which how they're doing that. So that's all it is. But it's just like a light that you see in the sky. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the tour, she shows us different, I guess, artifacts, you could say. And she said that she had an encounter with an extraterrestrial being when she was younger. And she said, you know, there are 3 purple or violet beings who came into contact with her. And without mentioning any words, the message that they wanted to share with her is make sure that she's able to see, to feel, and to love. Okay. So when I heard that, I was like, wow, that's what John teaches us to do, you know, to see, to feel, and to love. And these lavender beings, or these purple and violet beings, when I got home, I noticed that Healing Ancient Wounds, John's book, was this violet color. So I opened it up again. And for some reason, the words around mastery had captured my attention. And so like Rob has a testimonial, but I ended up flipping to the page about mastery in John's book. And early on, when John used to sign books and, you know, take pictures, I had gotten him to sign that picture. And then when I came across this chapter way years later, I was like, I think there's just a lot of synchronicity happening here, right? So ultimately, I got this thing where it's like, okay, Unu, you've been wanting to talk about myofascial release. In addition to, you've been tucking this idea in your back pocket. Now is the time, all right? So then I started building out this course. And so it is complete, and it's called MFR Website Miracles. And I'll say that it helps you really figure out what's important and what's not. I know that you in business help a lot of people. I think you even audit people's websites, right? Mm-hmm. I would say like one of the biggest mistakes people make is they're speaking with an MFR therapist where
for sure, right, 1,000 times over. Yes.
And so like, oh, it's elastin, collagen, and ground substance. And
cross-hand releases, piezoelectronic responses. Yes.
You got it, right? And that's all stuff that we geek out about. I love that.
Yeah, we love it. Give me more. Yeah.
But the common person is like, this doesn't mean anything to me, right? And so there's specific things that you want to put on your website that helps your potential patient or client take the next step. Another big issue that I see is like, you're trying to be a storyteller, but you are not the hero in your own story. You are the guide. Your patient or your client are the heroes, right? And so something that I'll see is like, oh, you know, I'm Unu. I have this fellowship training, or I have these postdoc training.
Had all these seminars.
Yeah. And it's like, nobody cares about that, right? Like, sure, as colleagues, that might create some connection, but your patient doesn't care about what letters you have behind your name. They don't care about what courses you've taken. All they care about is, hey, can you help them? Can you empathize with their situation? And do you have experiencing helping other people with that? And if you can convey that message to them, then it's more easy for them to take that next step of saying, I want to work with this person. Not because they're so great, not because they have all these accolades, but because they understand who I am and they can help and have shown that they've helped people in my situation. So through that process, I've just created my own course. And I'll say that I created the course and I loved it. I felt like it helped fulfill a need and helped kind of guide people to do the right things. But then after launching it, you realize, oh, wow, the people that are signing up for this course aren't tech savvy. So instead of it being about the actual content of the course, it's like, okay, I just have to be able to like be patient and encourage them enough to keep them going, like just like anything else, anything new that you do, there's going to be some frustrations with it, right? Like learning something new, there's a learning curve, like whether that be a language, whether that be myofascial release, it takes time. And so a lot of times people get frustrated. And then the worst thing that could happen is they'll quit, right? I'm sure with you in business is not going to be super easy, right? Like it takes effort, it takes consistency. But some people will get frustrated because they're not getting the results that they want as quickly as they thought that they would come. And hopefully you're able to kind of like guide them through that and say like, hey, it's going to take some time. Like you got to have some patience. And as long as you're being consistent and you're putting out the content and doing the work, then eventually it will pay off, right? And so for me, I have to recognize like, okay, it took me a certain amount of time to build out the course, but for someone to go through it who isn't very tech savvy, who gets overwhelmed, and actually when they even turn on their computer and like have to remember their password, they freak out. And it's like, okay, that's the stuff that I am now learning. Like, okay, this is what this has to be, not just a, hey, this is the how-to, these are what you got to do, because it's more complicated than that. And so through this process, I think I've learned when I'm refining it, like you have an idea, then you validate it by someone going through your course or your program. And it's not until someone goes through that you learn, okay, well, these are the real problems that I have to fix,
Yeah.
And so through that process, I'm helping some clients right now. And the best feeling to see the spark in their eye when they get a landing page to work correctly or a button to send an email saying, hey, a patient is asking to reach out for a phone consultation. And so through this process, I've been able to help MFR therapists create their own websites. And then more important than that, it's like when they present, like, let's say they do a group unwinding session and people after the group unwinding say, hey, how do I reach out? There's a lot of people who have like shame and embarrassment around their websites, like it doesn't look the way they want. It doesn't feel the way they want. And so I'm able to kind of coach people through that so that when they express themselves, it's an authentic version of themselves. And then in addition to that, I try to make it more functional so that your website markets for you on autopilot. I think my website, just by being out there, gets me 3 to 5 new leads every month. And so that for me is worthwhile for me to pay the fees for the website to host it. I use Kajabi. And and so like, it's a great way for you to have a website up and it markets for you 24/7, but it takes some time to build up on that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I think too, it's important for people that are listening to understand, just like anything else, just like our patients coming to us for myofascial release who want results faster, or they want results in 2 treatments or whatever. Just like healing isn't linear, business is not linear either. And there are going to be things that you have to go through in order to get to the other side for the result that you want in your business. Just like the same thing happens with our patients. Like they're probably going to have to go through a healing crisis to get to the other side of whatever they're suffering from. And they might have to do that multiple times. It's like these don't have to be barriers for your patients, but you have to be kind of willing to go through hard things yourself in order to be a really good therapist and a really good business owner. So, paying for a website could feel like a big barrier, but it's the cost of doing business. Mm-hmm. It's the cost of doing business to pay for these things, to put the time in and to figure it out. And I think for a lot of people out there that are listening, if you really check in, do you have a paid website right now? Do you have a clean domain? Are you paying for these things? If you're not, it's a reflection of what you think about yourself as a business owner on a deeper level. It's really important to kind of uncover what's going on and why you don't think you can afford to do it, right? Every MFR therapist should never under earn or burn out. That's my main mission, besides making MFR mainstream. But if you're unable to afford these things, there's a reason why. And that's because you're not speaking to clients aren't finding you to book sessions with you, because if they can, you're going to be fully booked, even if you live in a tiny town and even if you live in a giant town with multiple MFR therapists. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think a limiting belief that a lot of people have are like, oh, I'm in this small town. And if I was in this big city, then yeah, I could charge what you're charging, but I'm not, And I think I heard in your story, you were in a town where there's only one stoplight, So it's like, it's tiny. It's for you to be able to create and start your own myofascial release practice is just a testimony of like, it can be done. Most of the time, it's the limiting beliefs you have in yourself that stops you from doing these things that you would ultimately have joy and success with.
Yeah. I think there's a reason why John always says, like, get out of your own damn way, because we are the barrier to our success, both in getting our clients results and in creating the businesses that we want. We're the barrier.
1000%. 1000%.
Yeah. Well, I like that you didn't give up on creating your website course, because I think is a testament to show that you can have ideas and you can bring them into the world. And yeah, it might be one strategy to sell it and then build it. And it might be another strategy to build something and put it out there and then tweak it, right? And building digital products doesn't usually cost us a lot of money, but it costs us a lot of time. And then I think it also costs us our vulnerability, because you build something and then you put it out there and it's like kind of personal, whether or not we want it to feel personal, but it's like you have a baby and you're like, isn't my baby cute and precious? And I think people can feel like that about a course or a business opportunity, or even selling your own, myofascial release visits can feel very vulnerable because people can always say no.
Absolutely. And that's going to be expected, right? It's who are you when you hear the no? Mm-hmm. And I'll say that for me, in my experience, especially when I was first starting, I took that no as like a huge rejection of like, oh man, like, can I do this? Like they just said no, but I feel like I could help them. And I know that, this, that, and the other. And it takes some practice. It takes some experience. Honestly, it just takes that time for you to genuinely feel like you know who you are, right? And so that now when I do hear that no, sometimes it's like a no where I have to nudge a little bit harder, but also I can also just accept the fact that, hey, you might not be a good fit for me and I might not be a good fit for you. And that's totally fine. And I've referred people out to other people who I think they're a better fit with. And it doesn't mean anything for myself or my self-worth or my belief in myself in terms of, hey, can I do this practice or not? I'm just at this place. And I hope that everyone who starts can get to this place where it's like, hey, I have my core expenses figured out, where I'm not worried about rent or anything like that. And so now I could just serve the people who I feel called to serve, and the right people will find me. And I have great results with, especially with climbers and now non-climbers. But it's that beginning stages where, you're a little bit insecure. You're trying something new. It's hard. You're trying to figure out if you've got what it takes. And it's all this pressure. And I think you said it best. John tells us all the time, get out of your own damn way, right? Mm-hmm. We are the cork to everything flowing smoothly, but sometimes it's hard to let that go.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's hard for people to see what they're creating on their own. I think that's when, like having a business coach or having someone that's not your friend, someone that's paid to look at what you're doing, because they're not trying to impress you in any way. They're like a neutral person that's going to be like, this is the reason. What I can see happening is why you're getting the result you're getting. So then you have a new choice. Like you've got awareness of the situation, because most of the time I think we're just unaware. Like we're unaware that we're insecure. We're unaware that we're afraid to sell MFR. We're unaware that we have thoughts about our price and that's keeping us under earning and overworking. Or like we've been raised in this mentality where it's like, you're only successful if you see 60 clients a week, but at the cost of everything else in your life,
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think something that I'd come across a podcast that you had with Monica, the Polish princess. You're like, oh, we have to prioritize health first. Mm-hmm. You can't pour from an empty cup. And I love that idea, because early on, I burnt myself out probably like 3 different times because I kept pushing. And I had to have this come to Jesus moment where it's like, what am I pushing for?
Yeah.
Is it for the validation of from others or what? Because I'm helping people. And that's what I told myself I would be happy with, you know? And now that I'm here, it's like I moved this target. So yeah, I think it's just becoming more aware of what is one possible. And then two, just like being comfortable, being uncomfortable. And then I think you hit it right on the head where it's like, it is important to seek out the guidance from people who are at where you're trying to go. And I mentioned that because early on, I started my own practice and I would just survey everybody around me and everybody has an opinion.
Mm-hmm. They're like belly buttons. Everybody's got one.
Yeah, everyone has, you should do it like this, hey,
mm-hmm.
Have you seen this? And it's like, if the person that you're talking to doesn't have the business or even the life that you want, it doesn't matter what they say, right? Versus if I'm, let's say, an MFR therapist, which I am, and I'm like, ooh, I want to start a practice. I'm overwhelmed. Hey, Heather, can you help me? Because you have the experience of not only starting your own practice, but now you help others. It's like you can have a bird's eye view perspective that's saying, hey, you're in the forest. It's overwhelming. You don't know north from south, east to west, but I am here to guide you through the thicket of the forest.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the true value of having a coach or speaking with people who are at where you're at. And I would caution those of you, and from my own personal experiences and mistakes, of like surveying people around you and then hearing things that, sure, it might make sense, but just because it makes sense doesn't mean that it's going to work or is even right. I think that's a channel 5. Hey, it makes linear logically sense, but channel 3 is the subconscious, which a lot of times it doesn't make sense on paper, but the way that it plays out is the way it's supposed to play out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. For sure. Do you want to share with us, like, what is your favorite thing about your myofascial release practice right now?
My favorite thing about my myofascial release practice, my favorite thing is definitely seeing someone in shocking awe of what they just felt get released. I think we hold so much, whether it be tension or stress or trauma, and it takes a myofascial release session for you to be like, I didn't know I was supposed to feel this good, or they have an unwinding experience and they're like, what was that? I feel much better. I didn't know that was even what is that? And it's kind of that awe-inspiring moment that you see, man, this is like magic. And I don't think I'll ever get tired of seeing that, especially, when someone is very stern, it's very tough for them to let go of control. And they do it just for a little bit, and then you build on that. I would say the favorite thing for me in my practice right now is just being able to be the authentic version of myself as a myofascial release therapist, and being able to connect with people to help them with their pains and injuries and resolving that in a way that, and it doesn't have to be this big, violent unwinding, but when they happen, it's kind of cool for them to recognize, oh, wow, this is like totally something that I never knew was part of this healing process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is fun when people experience this new ease in their bodies. Like, even if it's only for a few minutes, it's kind of the same sensation I get when I see people find ease in their, like, setting their rate or selling MFR or just somewhere that ease in the MFR business. It's like, yes, this is what ease feels like. And you can have it anytime. Like it's like a switch. You can be in pain and you can also have ease, and you can have them at the same time. Just because you have a chronic pain condition doesn't mean you won't ever get better, even if someone has told you that you won't. Mm-hmm. And I love being the answer for that. Like, I love being the one that can restore hope for someone in that situation, or even for business owners that have had their business for 20 or 30 years and they've chronically under-earned. They're just these massively experienced therapists, and they're finally like, I don't want to do that anymore. Like, I want my business to feel easy, and I want to actually have money at the end of the month when I'm doing all of these things for my clients. And they see how easy it is. It's not harder to make more money. It's actually easier. So that's the chef's kiss for me.
Love it. Yeah. I think something John has mentioned in his seminars is like, what would it feel like if it was easy? And like, I think you hit the nail right on the head, where it's like, Oh, it can feel easy. You might feel pain simultaneously, but it can be easy. It doesn't have to be this, oh, if you want to earn more, you have to work more or you have to work
Right.
harder. It's like,
Yeah, it's not so linear.
you got it. And so
Yeah.
I think I love that you not only sense that sensation, but then you love seeing that with your clients as well. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's my favorite. Today's podcast episode is sponsored by MFR Brochures. MFR brochures were designed by an expert level MFR therapist, especially for you, to make it easy to educate your clients and ensure they get the most out of their MFR treatments. MFR brochures showcase an easy way to talk to your clients about the healing crisis, emotions, unwinding, and at-home self-treatment. Order your beautifully designed and simple to display MFR brochures today. Go to www.mfrbrochures.com. While you're there, check out the brand new release of MFR banners and make your next event or booth even better with both MFR brochures and MFR banners. www.mfrbrochures.com. Use code MFR podcast at checkout to save 10% on your next order. Why don't you tell me about what the hardest thing has been for you so far, or what you've experienced as an MFR therapist, the hardest thing you've experienced as an MFR therapist?
The hardest thing that I've experienced as an MFR therapist would just be truly accepting this version, which I do consider is my authentic self. I think we grow up and society tells us we have to be a certain way. Maybe there's pressure on our parents, our culture, things like that. And once you really start delving into your authentic self, your true self, outside of all those things, then one, you can find your joy. And I'm not going to say like I'm drastically different than who I am around my family, but there is a difference, and I think I play a certain role. Like I'm the youngest of 4 brothers in my family. And I can tell that when I hang around family, I revert back to being the youngest, where it's like, and for all of those youngest siblings out there, we don't do a whole lot, right? Like things get done for us and this, that, and the other, right? But once I started really tapping into like, who am I? Like I love myofascial release. Sure, it might turn off some of my friends, things like that. But hey, this is authentic healing and it's helping people. And that is true to my core. Like the reason why I pursued myofascial release is because I saw that it could help people heal from traumatic things in their lives. And so I just pursued it. But there's a shift, right? You have to make that change. Who are you willing to be? What relationships will you have to let go of because they're only going to see you in a certain light that they know you as? And that's going to cap your growth. And as a myofascial release therapist, especially if it's like, oh, you're going to start your own practice, right? The first 2 weeks of you starting your practice, you're going to get this insane amount of supports. Oh, good for you. You get to chase your dreams. Hey, good job, right? But what I've learned through experience, unfortunately, is like for some reason, once you start getting some success and you're doing better than they thought that you might be doing, that's where some resentment gets to build. And I think that was the hardest lesson for me to learn is like, I had grown up with a certain group of friends where I was like, yeah, we hang out, we do things all the time. And then once I started essentially embarking on my own healing journey, I could see that we weren't in resonance anymore, and it's like, I'm a pretty loyal friend, so it was very tough for me to let go of that. Mm-hmm. But different events took place, ultimately that happened, right? And so I'll say that once I was able to let go of that, the coolest thing about that is, there's so much fear and you don't want to do that. But once you actually accept it and do that, then there's other people who are ready to fill in those spaces that you align with, that you're in resonance with. That now when I talk about myofascial release, I get to geek out about it versus like kind of hiding it because it's a little bit embarrassing to talk about, especially when it's kind of being criticized, right? But the further that I've gotten into myofascial release, met more therapists, and now am someone who like helps other myofascial release therapists in different ways, then I can see like, hey, this is my tribe. Like I think once you learn who your tribe is, then you can be comfortable knowing like, hey, we're all here. We all want you to succeed, not because of anything from us, right? It's not a competition between us, but because, hey, we're doing this really meaningful work. And if you feel called to do it, we want to help you do the work too, because then you're able to serve and spread this work and ultimately help heal more people. But I'll say that the toughest thing that was part of my MFR journey was shedding that old skin and growing and being comfortable with the person that I truly am and am becoming.
Yeah. And I think that that's just normal growth is when we look around the room and all of a sudden the people in the room have changed. Like we surround ourselves by different people based on where we're at in our lives. And it doesn't necessarily mean that anything's gone wrong. And it also doesn't stop you from feeling the pain of the loss of relationships or changes in relationships. I think one thing I tell my coaching program people is, you're going to experience times where what you would have shared with your parents, like maybe talking about your rates, like it just becomes that you don't share that information with certain people anymore to maintain the relationships. And you make active choices like, I can't go to this person for this kind of information anymore, but where can I go? Where are my resources where I can get the help that I need? And I've experienced that too, like shifting out of myofascial release hands-on practice to being the MFR coach. That changed a lot of my relationships within our community and it was very difficult for me. But there's so many other relationships that have formed from there that have like filling in, the gaps, and we make our own community, right? And when you are changing, it will disrupt relationships, but it will also bring about really cool experiences and even better, stronger relationships with new people that you never even knew you were going to have the opportunity to meet. Like us, for instance, like, would we be having this conversation? I don't know. It's like so great.
Absolutely. It's a moment of synchronicity. And like I mentioned, it's like once you're comfortable being that person that you are called to be, you meet and connect with other people who fill those spaces that were closed off, so to speak.
Yeah. And I think it's okay for us to be MFR weirdos or whatever other people think. What are your ideas about making MFR mainstream? And when you hear that, like, as my mission, what does that spark in your brain?
So for me, I love it. I think it's the future, just like John says, myofascial release is the healthcare of the future. Now, I think it's been tough for it to catch on because the amount of traditional stuff that gets churned out there is just so much. But it takes someone like yourself to say, hey, this is my goal. I want MFR to be the future of healthcare. How can I do that? Well, that means we have to have more MFR therapists and more MFR therapists who start their own practices, right?
And make money.
And make money. You got it. And so that there becomes this hub or this consciousness around myofascial release. Now, do I feel like I'm in alignment with that? Absolutely. I say another favorite part that I get to do in my practice is sometimes you meet someone or someone comes to your practice and they're like, my surgeon said I needed back surgery. And you're like, wait, why? What happened? Oh, I got an x-ray, I got an MRI, I got a bulge in my disc, And it's like, yeah, but who says you need surgery? And everyone is just looking for that quick fix. And unfortunately, fear drives that, right?
Yeah.
And so myofascial release, hopefully you're able to kind of be centered and present with them and just kind of help guide them. And I think that's kind of the main thing. It's not like we're saying, hey, this should replace anything. It's like, hey, this should be the first line of defense, right?
Yeah.
It can help immensely. And at the worst, it just won't do anything. But at least try that first versus, hey, you're going to get this back surgery. It's going to be $100,000. And by the way, if we fuse your back, probably in 10 years, it's going to fail and you're going to have to get another one, right? Like,
yeah. And in the meantime, you're going to be, crippled and still have the same pain that you had before the back surgery. But
exactly.
Yeah.
And just as a tidbit, and obviously I'm biased as a PT, but it's because I have been able to help people who had been told, hey, you're going to need back surgery. And through working together, they were able to cancel that surgery. And that is where I feel the most fulfillment, where it's like, okay, I had set out to be a physical therapist. Now I do myofascial release, but it's to help somebody. It's not to say, oh, hey, I'm a doctor of physical therapy. Hey, I'm this person. It's like, you're here to serve somebody else. And if your heart is genuinely aligned with that, then everything else will work itself out. Then you will be able to start your practice. You will be able to make money. But if that's the reason you're doing it, I unfortunately think that you're not in alignment and it might be tougher for you. I'm not going to say it can't be done, but you might be working harder than you need to.
Yeah. I don't think anyone becomes an MFR therapist to get rich.
Yeah.
Right? I would probably guess, like, I'm sure there's some career fields like surgeons or whatever. Maybe they're like, I am going into this field on purpose because I want to make a lot of money, but you also have to like pass all the classes and you know what I mean? So at the end of the day, I think what would be really cool is if we make MFR mainstream, and that means people have to be making money doing it.
Yes.
But as part of that, I think that more and more people will choose it as their career path, like ahead of time, because they know that the results are so incredible. Like it will start to catch on in this way where, we've even had people go through our program. Kristen Konzelman's been on my podcast lots of times. She was a band director. She found my book while she was in massage school and became an MFR therapist right out of massage school.
Really? That's awesome.
Like this is a thing. And people are looking to make awesome businesses and looking for like secondary careers, right? And getting the training and becoming MFR therapists on purpose because they know that they can make it work. First of all, to help people, but second of all, to like really have a full life. Just because we've chosen to help people doesn't mean we don't get that full life side of the business too, or side of life, because I think we need to have both. We need to be able to have both things, and it's not an either or. And it's okay to make money.
Yeah.
It's okay to want to make money. That doesn't make you less of an MFR therapist, or in some ways, like I want to know when I'm getting treated that my MFR therapist is like able to feed themselves, is sleeping at night, and can afford to get their own MFR therapy.
That's excellent. I don't know that I share those thoughts. I'm just like, I just need to get better. Help me release some of this. But
yeah,
maybe that's the next thing I need to be like, hey, I want to be able to help you live a fulfilled life as well,
Yeah, because I mean, when you go in for your own MFR therapy, if you knew that the MFR therapist had just seen 20 clients ahead of you because they need to pay rent, like, do you want to be the 20th client on the table?
I would not, I typically pick late morning or early afternoon appointments, so I don't have to be number 20, but you could see that, right? Like, especially when I was working in an outpatient orthopedic job where I was seeing multiple patients per hour.
Yeah. There's a difference, right?
Yeah. By the end of the day, you're just a little bit worn out. So would I want my myofascial therapist to feel that? I would not. No.
And you don't want to feel it for yourself, right?
Yeah, absolutely not.
Yeah. What's an ideal schedule for you when you're treating patients?
An ideal schedule for me when I am treating patients, I start at 10 a.m. I recognize that I'm not the best version of myself at 7 a.m. So
me neither. Ew.
Yeah. So I make sure to start at a time when I feel awake. That's 10. I would say an ideal caseload for me would be 4 patients, maybe 5, but I don't want to see any more than that in one day. I think I start to feel like I'm not as present. Just like you said, it's like it starts to wear.
When you get tired.
Yes. Mm-hmm. When you get tired. I would say treating 4 to 5 patients per day and then not having to work on the weekends if I don't have to. And then since I'm a business owner, I would like to have one admin day just to figure out all that stuff. So I'm not having to switch back and forth, being the therapist, being the admin, having to do different things.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I would say clinically in terms of patient care, starting at 10, working for 4 to 5 hours, getting done by 2 or 3 o'clock, and then enjoying the rest of my afternoon, being present with my family, my friends, and rounding out the rest of my life.
Yeah. Could maybe going rock climbing.
Definitely going rock climbing. Absolutely going rock climbing.
We didn't touch on this much, but you started out as a PT for rock climbers and you still kind of carry that branding with you. Now you're helping more than just rock climbers. What do you say to your old self that like niched down into rock climbing instead of like, would you say like your new niche is just myofascial release care, or what would you say about that?
Okay, so, when I started business and I didn't know anything, I had worked with different coaches and they're great in their own rights. And I remember I was working with Jared Carter, who is a cash-based PT in Austin, great coach. And he was saying for typically what he has seen is for a business, a physical therapy business to be successful, you either niche down into a certain population or you niche down into a certain modality or like myofascial release. And so for me, I happen to be a rock climber and, and I do believe it where it's like, if you're speaking to everybody, you're not speaking to anybody. And as a physical therapist, if I'm just the generic, hey, get your knee pain to go away, then I'm competing against these huge physical therapy chains that have millions of dollars for their marketing and their advertising. Whereas I don't have that. Right. So I have to make my shots count. And so I picked rock climbers and it's been a wild ride. And so different things have unfolded in ways that I couldn't have planned for. And I don't regret anything about it. But I think right now I'm at this chapter where it's like, I can't help other people, like I've done the rock climbing thing and I will continue to do it. But I'm in this transition where it's like, that doesn't have to be the only thing I'm ever known for. And especially when MFR therapists or clients like, do you only treat rock climbers? I could tell it's like, okay, I need to change the messaging around that because that's not all I do, but it is a population and client that is near and dear to my heart.
Sure.
And so if I were to tell my younger self what I thought about that, it's like, I would just say like, hey, it's going to be hard. Hey, you're going to create this.
It's going to be hard.
Yeah, it's going to be hard. Yeah, you're going to be uncomfortable, but hey, you're going to enjoy the ride. You're going to create this space that you didn't even think was possible. And you're going to be able to enjoy helping the people that you identify with as a climber. So I'll just say like with anything, like with climbers, it's a very niche sport. And if you work with a non-climbing PT, then like oftentimes, let's say you have a finger injury. It's the most common injury in climbers. Then you go to a PT mill, a traditional insurance-based clinic. Most often they're going to be like, oh, your finger hurts where you're climbing? Okay, well then just stop climbing. It's like...
Right. And they're like, wait a minute.
Yeah. And then on top of that, as climbers, like climbers are obsessed with climbing. And so if you tell them not to climb, they're not going to listen. And so for me, it's like, okay, well, I have to at least give you parameters to climb within so that you can keep climbing. But remember, we're rehabbing your finger. So I don't have any regrets about that. I'm actually, when I look at what I've been able to create, it's like, I'm very proud of that, because there was a point where I was like, dude, this isn't possible. Like I had all these limiting beliefs that, hey, I couldn't do it. Climbers wouldn't be willing to pay what I wanted to charge. And it's just not, it's not going to be viable. And so for me to take that risk and for it to play out and be still something I'm still doing to this day, I look back and maybe I would say like, hey, be kinder to yourself. Don't worry about it and be patient. Recognize it takes time and then don't feel like you have to only do this one thing. And so the version that I am at right now is like, okay, I do want to do myofascial release. I do want to be able to help non-climbers. How can I create the messaging that helps the right people find me on that front?
Well, you're already known for rock climbing, right? Like even if you just redirected your website to a non-rock climbing forward website, right? You're the website guy. And just
So I do, but like when I was building things out for climbers, you have to do it for what they're looking for. So,
yeah.
So if I just redirected that, I mean, I'm sure that I always ask my patients and clients how they found me. I would recommend everyone does that so that they can figure out, hey, where are your leads coming from? And they'll say like, oh, I just Googled rock climbing physical therapy and yours was the first site that popped up. So I've already put in the work to get there and that takes time.
Yeah.
And then for the myofascial release, because it's not climbing, I feel like the messaging is different and I have a different website for myofascial release.
Oh, okay. But you do have a myofascial release website.
I do.
Okay. Well, why don't you tell people how they can find you? Because a lot of times MFR therapists listen to these podcasts and then they're like, oh, I'm going to be in that area. Who's over there? And not everybody's on the directory. I don't know why. It makes it annoying, but not everybody's on the directory. So how do people find you?
So I'm based out of Austin, Texas. My physical therapy practice is called Perspective Physical Therapy. CompleteClimber.com if you're a climber. And if you're not a climber, then you can go to www.myofascial.health. That's more my myofascial release side. In addition to that, myofascial.health is my website that I use. If you are looking to create a website for your myofascial release practice, you can go to www.myofascial.health/website. I have just a quick checklist of what you should have on your website. It's absolutely free. You just got to punch in your email so I know where to send it. But I think that's a great start for you to figure that out. Other than that, I'm on Facebook, Unu Tran. I have a rock climbing photo at this time. And then at Unu DPT for Instagram. And I think those are the main ones that I use.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for being part of the show. For everybody listening, we'll have at least some of these links in the show notes. That has a lot of links. Well, I'm going to do my best. Thank you for coming. And I'll be back next week with another episode of the MFR Coaches Podcast. See you then. Bye. Thanks for joining me today. If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a minute and rate and review the podcast. I appreciate it. For more information, please follow me on Facebook and Instagram at The MFR Coach. And check out my website, www.themfrcoach.com for more information. If you are currently not working 20 hours or less and making six figures in your MFR business, I want to help you change that. Make sure you tune into the show and get on my email list so you never miss out on important trainings and information. To be the first to find out when we are enrolling next for my 12-month Business Foundations coaching program, get on that email list at www.themfrcoach.com/join. Inside this program, you'll learn how to raise your rate, overcome objections, and sell MFR. You'll become the MFR therapist that never under-earns and never burns out. It's up to us to make MFR mainstream, and it starts with you and your successful MFR practice. See you next week.